On. Hey, welcome, Dr. Kurt Jefferson. Thank you for taking time to get curious with me today about this curiosity project we're sharing with the world in hopes of creating for the world, but with the world. And as a part of it, we've broken it up into different parts. And one of the parts is this curiosity R&D. So what does research and development look like in the context of a larger curiosity project? And I'm really excited to have you on here because, again, as I shared before, you're a large part of the inspiration for this. Even the name that I want to call it, the Knowledge Garden, came directly from you. But also, in addition to serving as this, connective tissue between the innovation and the creativity that comes from curiosity-based thinking, to serve as that connective tissue with higher ed in hopes of furthering additional research, identifying supporting research, but also this thing about developing something you refer to as curiosity-based leadership. So before I turn it over to you, so we can get curious about what this knowledge garden could look like, just to share with people watching why you are the perfect person for this is just your background, not only as a leader in higher education, as a dean at Spalding University, but also as an expert, as a professor of political science and experience in the global leadership arena. So I'm going to be quiet and curious going forward, but welcome, and really, really curious to hear what you have to share about how you would conceive a knowledge garden, or how to do curiosity R&D for the 21st century.
Well, Matt, as always, it's a pleasure to be with you, and right back at you. I think your enthusiasm for curiosity is something that, of course, for those of us who worked with you in the past, and our working relationship goes back many years, but for those of us who know the kind of work you've done with the concept of curiosity, your passion, your knowledge, your investment in making not just young people, but learners at all levels, from, elementary to secondary to higher education to postgraduate. It knows no bounds. And that's the thing I love about what you're attempting to do here. And appreciate the shout out on X. I think it's great to think about the work that we've been doing for many years now. And a lot of our conversations would center on what you're talking about, this concept, whether I came up with it or I plagiarized it or I found it somewhere. I shouldn't say the P word as a grad dean, but I don't think I did. But this concept of knowledge garden, I think, is a great one, because I think, we're lifelong learners. And when I talk to my graduate students in global leadership here at Spalding U in Louisville, Kentucky, USA, I really want them to think about learning outside of the academy. Where do the applications play, both inside the academy in terms of what you said, R&D? We focus more on the research side, the theoretical side, I think, in a graduate program. But it has applied outcomes and applied relevance to the development side when you go put those two words together. And I know it means something different in the corporate world and spaces vis-a-vis maybe the academic environment, but it's important that we do.
Can I pause you real quickly right there?
Yeah, please go right ahead.
That's the beauty of this curiosity project. It's brand new, right? We're going to Mars here. So it's interesting you identify that there is this difference between what R&D means in the corporate world or model versus the academic world. But what if there's a third? I'm big on third ways, all right? Exactly. What if through this curiosity project, the reason this would benefit the world, the curiosity project, both the corporate world, the academic world, even the nonprofit, the social justice world, if you want to call it that, is that we're creating something brand new. And instead of saying we have to do it this way, we can take the best parts of all these others and blend it into something. And through that, we would not only create something new, but something incredibly valuable to the existing R&Ds out there. So that's why it's great to hear you come in and, first of all, identify those differences, but then how can we start pulling in what's best from these, and then truly creating something new and valuable to the existing.
Yeah, that is really well put. And I think, first of all, I like the third way idea. You're a Blairite. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
Tony Blair going back to May 1997 when he takes power in England. And I taught, for your listeners and your viewers, I taught British politics, European politics for many, many years. Really ended up focusing on Russia and the former Yugoslavia, which you and I have a passion for the latter area. But and a lot of great entrepreneurial work going on in the former Yugoslav areas.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But back to this point, I think the knowledge garden concept is something that you've talked much about. The learning lab.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get an actual empirical learning lab that is this kind of interesting knowledge garden that has conceptual elements, it has opportunities for applicable or applied,
Applied curiosity.
demonstration. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
has the ability for people to beta test what
Uh-huh.
they want to learn and be curious about. And then, I think thirdly, one of the things that, as an old curmudgeon professor, the idea of reflecting, where we
Mhm.
get our curiousness from. I mean,
Yeah.
the ability to reflect. And I think of the book, the scholarly book, The Reflective Practitioner,
Okay.
and the author of that book is I'm forgetting, it was a sociologist, and I'm forgetting the name of the author, but that book is such an important book because we need to be reflecting. We
Yep.
need to understand that if you want to be curious, you have to also understand that there has to be a certain amount of reflection,
Mm-hmm.
and learning for learning's sake in the area of curiosity is a good thing.
Oh,
We're in a
and you get, well,
culture.
yeah.
Please go
Out of
ahead.
curiosity, it's like there's levels to this, right? But if we
Exactly.
talk about curiosity as a tool and curiosity as a resource, well, don't use them blindly. You got to understand the tools and the resource of curiosity and the science behind it. Like, what if we don't just treat curiosity as creativity, or approach it as an artist, but what if we treat curiosity as an engineer or as a scientist or a
Exactly.
mathematician? Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about curiosity. Why we need an R&D center, a knowledge garden, is because there's a difference between me walking into a classroom or working with entrepreneurs and saying, hey, this stuff works. I can see the curiosity going from point A to point B, versus like academics putting in, like you said, in a laboratory and providing repeatable results that show, and data supporting that curiosity. It's not just you feel it and you see it, but here
Exactly.
how it works, so that we can create more of it and do more with it by a deeper, better understanding of it. And where else
Well,
would
and,
it
and
take place other than
I like that, and I want to riff off that for a minute.
please, please.
I want to riff off that for just a minute. I think you've talked a lot about what I'm about to say here for many years, but to that point, one of the things that the ramifications of this are pretty wide, and I just think it's important that we allow, when you look at the workplace today, and you look at what's transpiring in the global workplace, and I'm sure whether in the United States or Europe or Africa or Asia or other parts of the world, um, we're finding, I think, that employees need to be stimulated. This gets to your concept of the neuropsychology of curiosity
Yep.
that you've written on and talked a lot about. That if we aren't trying to understand what motivates employees, what motivates leaders, what motivates individuals, and if you look behind me at this score, lots of books sitting behind me, you can tell that what keeps me curious are those things. Now I'm trying to move to this and having it on an electronic device. So that's a curiosity in and of itself. But the reality is, if we don't have the ability to remain curious, we're not going to be able to stay current in the profession, in the
Yep.
leadership position, in the academy, in the corporate world, whatever the position is. We're not going to be able to continue to build uh, curiosity-based leadership skills. That's a concept
Mhm.
we can talk about it probably on another time.
Yeah.
But the continuation of the dialogue, even as we develop as professionals and individuals,
Mhm.
cannot happen. And
Yep.
that's why I think this is such an important discussion for, not just the academy, but as it's applied and plays out in the world in which we work and live.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think you touch on a lot of excellent points there for the need of this. And one of the I think you also know I've been doing deeper dives into the existing research and science behind curiosity, and just one of the fascinating things that I've been discovering. Again, this is kind of like, well, no duh if you've been using it for a while, but to see that the science kind of bears this out is the connection between curiosity and engagement, curiosity and motivation. And again, the it's also great because these studies, a lot of them aren't even complete. It's like, this is what we found so far, but we need more studies. That all of these studies I read on curiosity, they all conclude in the same ways. We need to study this more. So that's the other.
Exactly.
What they're bubbling up is that curiosity equals engagement. And that's not that goes across age groups, across situations. That means if you need to engage students, curiosity. You need to engage customers, curiosity. You need engaged, employees, curiosity. And it's not like we need 3 hours of curiosity every day. It can be treated like a pill. Like you can intentionally pique someone's curiosity in 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Where we're trying to research to determine the exact amount of time. And from that moment on, the brain reacts in very unique ways that not only provides immediate changes in cognition, memory, satisfaction, feelings, but downstream, like a long term, it'll percolate later and everything else. And again, this is just, it's like we haven't landed on the moon yet. We're still just kind of orbiting it in terms of research. But what we're finding so far is beyond fascinating. And you can see I'm not just passionate about it. I'm trying to yell as loud, like we need this to happen. We need deeper research, and it's not going to be the two of us. We need to find as many people as possible. Hence the knowledge garden to grow those branches out to the different groups, people, organizations who can start taking deeper looks into the science and power potential behind curiosity.
Yeah, wonderfully put. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what I'm about to say, and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is, when I think of higher ed and I think of organized, institutionalized learning, while I've spent my whole career in the academy and I love it, and I think it adds a lot of value. I also think that a knowledge garden has a lot of potential from a kind of open-ended,
Interesting.
kind of institutionalized approach rather than a closed box. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, Matt, if you think, because the knowledge garden is a metaphor, it can be a lot of things. I mean, it can be the garden that just keeps growing,
Mhm.
bean stalks and corn stalks, and that's all good. It feeds the world. It does other things. It feeds your curiosity, but
Mhm.
yet it can grow to the point where you can't prune it anymore, for
Yep.
example.
Yep.
On the
Yep.
other hand, it can also have uneven distribution of, a garden that is stultified over on the left side with,
Yeah.
beets that don't grow very well versus the corn or the beans or whatever. I'm the grandson of two Iowa farmers,
So
who
you gotta
spent
go.
their
Yeah.
whole lives, cultivating soil and dealing with pigs and cows and things like that. And I can tell you, they would tell you some very interesting stories about those metaphors and how they play out.
Mhm.
But I also wonder, just from your own opinion, why do you think the knowledge garden might be a better kind of way to conceptualize curiosity versus, and
Yeah.
you build a global social entrepreneurship center when we worked together at a university for many years,
Mhm.
prior to your trip out to California now where you live, and me in Kentucky. We were in Missouri for a while together working. What's your thought on that, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I probably would have had a very different answer or response prior to this conversation. But so what I think the reason it should take root in something new is because we need something new, right? So hence the knowledge garden. I think currently too much R&D, going back to what you said before, too much of our R&D is being done in silos. It's being done in the corporate world. It's being done in the academia. And I'll even add a third silo, just individually. There's so many, not just lifelong learners, but with the internet, with chat GPT, AI, everything else, the ability to self-teach, to learn. Heck, go on YouTube and see how many tutorials there are and everything else, right? The ability
Yeah,
for
great point.
people to do their own R&D, following their curiosity, is out there. Now, as an academic and as a professional, that's not always the best recipe for success. Like, your curiosity
Right.
could take you to some faulty R&D, right?
Exactly.
So on one hand, we need to help those individuals who are doing this individually, right? You shouldn't have to be connected to one, an academy or a corporation to do so. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think you should have to, right? But the other thing is even if they're excellent academic R&D and corporate R&D, they're still limited by virtue of lack of collaboration.
So yeah, that's a great point.
And if we can bring all of these together, at least three, and maybe I'm missing some more, but it's kind of it's neutral ground, right? And that's the other great thing about this curiosity project and this knowledge garden in particular. Other elements of it would be to help develop IP, to help develop other ideas, patents, so on and so forth, where the curiosity project, it's not like we're taking ownership of that stuff. Again, we're the facilitators. We can make our revenue from other aspects of the larger project. The knowledge garden could be run completely revenue free. I mean, this could be zero revenue. And because of that, while it's folded under the larger project, it almost operates as like an internal, nonprofit organization, so that the focus of this component of the curiosity project is purely for the facilitation of these existing R&Ds plus whatever.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying. I think one of the things that as you're talking, it's kind of crystallizing in my mind is this idea that, we're trying to figure out, one, why curiosity is important, which we know it is. I mean, you're saying that it is
we need to
now
prove it empirically,
scientifically
right?
being shown that you cannot really stay engaged without being curious. Much of, education, social life, corporate life has become kind of routinized and bureaucratized in ways. I'm speaking like a sociologist, I'm a political scientist, but the reality is
It's
this is the language we use.
Yeah.
And to keep people engaged and to lead to not just curiosity, but curiosity-based leadership, where you're getting people, to your point that you've been the Pied Piper for, asking curious questions over one's career to stoke more curiosity.
Yep.
I think is important. But I also think that the thing that academe brings to it, what an academic mindset and approach brings to it, is things like frameworks. What lenses are we looking at here? In my world as a social scientist, it's things like history, politics, sociology, psychology. We want to look at through those frames what the brain says on that latter one, what the brain ties. And you've studied a lot of kind of psychology related to curiosity. Mine would be more history or political science, looking at how do structures and human structures and power dynamics factor into nations' decisions to be more productive or less productive, or more curious or less curious. And then I think from the knowledge garden standpoint, how do you create a system that isn't totally bounded by preconceived, I'm getting a little bit philosophical here, but preconceived,
that's why I want you on here.
Preconceived, limitations and borders and things that say and this goes to your point, Matt, about the what if idea. What if we could have a knowledge garden that keeps us from having all these preconceived boundaries, say you're not allowed to go outside that boundary. And then it ties into some of our former colleagues who used to say things like, when we say, let's get outside the box. And then we had the one colleague who said, what box?
Yep.
And that actually got me excited and curious to think, yeah,
Yep.
there is no box. And this
Yeah.
gets into transnational issues. And the last thing I'll say real quick, Matt,
Yeah.
before you comment on all this is it does tie to problem solving. So we have all these vexing transnational issues. It does not matter. You can name them in all of these subjects. In all, it's my university here, we're trying to attack, systemic, poverty to, behavioral problems to psychological problems. We have a lot of health professions issues. We're located in a zip code that doesn't have a lot of wealth, and we're trying to improve the lot of a lot of students vis-a-vis their graduate programs and undergraduate programs here at Spalding, right in the heart of the urban area of Louisville, Kentucky. And there are transnational problems, even as basic. And you remember I taught a course on this at Westminster, as water. Just basic, not just what is water, access to water. How does water affect people's lives? The human body is made up of what, 2/3, 3/4 of water. So, even something that basic can benefit from this curiosity-based approach in the Knowledge Garden. Just throwing that out there.
Well, and to connect our metaphors, there's evidence to suggest just the simple act of building gardens in communities improves the overall community health and individuals' well-being and everything else. So what if this knowledge garden could be something that doesn't just, facilitate
a literal garden,
but truly greens or gardens up, communities through this curiosity.
Excellent.
Hey, this is a perfect place. All right. So we've only gotten partway through because I wanted to, you said something I want to leave everybody with, but it also works as a good bridge to our next discussion. I'm hoping we'll follow up soon to focus one of the components of this component, right? So within the Knowledge Garden, we mentioned as a part of this curiosity R&D, we'd also be producing things, producing new research, producing new curiosity-based thinking methodologies, so on and so forth. And one of those would just be this concept of curiosity-based leadership. So I think the next time we talk, let's just focus purely on this idea of curiosity-based leadership. What does it look like? What could it look like? How does it fit into this knowledge garden, but also the larger project, curiosity project as we go forward? And just to leave people with something to think about, I wanted to share something that goes to this, I think, as far as what does being a curious leader not just look like, but sound like, right? And you said something early on when you're talking about learning outside of the academy, right? That's an incredibly bold concept especially for the dean of a university, not just to say, but to say bold, confidently. And I know you truly believe this. But that's the kind of things, the kind of statements, the kind of attitude, mindset, whatever you want to call a curious leader needs to have, not to be provocative or not to say this is good or this is bad. But, how do you're talking about getting outside the box. Well, if the academy is the box and there is no box, then you truly need to leave the academy or you need to learn outside of it. Right. So,
I mean, real quick, let me just say, and then I'll let you.
Please, I'll let you have the last word, and then we'll follow up.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, real quick, I mean, at some point, all baby eagles have to, leave the nest and fly on their own. So whether that is, the undergrad who spends 3 or 4 years in college or university, post gymnasium, post high school. Yeah. I know you may have a global audience here, so I want to use culturally relevant kind of examples, but gymnasium in Germany or high school in the United States or public school or what have you in England, or they go to a trade school in Germany for a year or two and learn a trade. Or they decide to do like you and I did. They go a little bit further beyond the baccalaureate degree and get a graduate degree. No matter what happens, we all have to leave the confines of the educational environment at some point and learn as we go. I think all of us know that, the idea of the learning process was not meant to be an end in of itself. And I know much of what I was saying in terms of research sometimes is an end in itself, and that's not necessarily bad.
No.
I'm just saying that what you're alluding to is you really have to, at some point, to stay curious. It has to come from, external, non-institutional kinds of areas that you can maintain and grow through interaction with human beings and other humans, and learning while we go. So I
Yeah.
think that's I'm not, obviously, I've spent my whole career in higher education, the son of two professors. I love what this environment brings, because it helps us organize our way of
Mhm.
thinking. But there are other ways to conceptualize, ideas. And even though much of what we do in our disciplines emerges and starts in the academy or higher ed, there
Mhm.
is so much out there as well, that in these new kind of connected spaces, in the social media sphere and other places, what
Mhm.
you're doing helps us be curious about new ways to think about curiosity and conceptualize and learn, and continue to come together in learning communities that go well beyond the
Oh,
5,000 American universities, et cetera. And that's the way it should be, to be
it's the way it should be. And I appreciate that too. And just to put a bow on it, it's funny because I actually I appreciate my time in studying and learning in university, but curiosity based thinking wasn't developed in any of the classes I took at the university, at graduate or undergraduate. It was developed as a Peace Corps volunteer working at a gymnasia in Kosovo,
fascinating.
Macedonia. So I was actually in a gymnasia. You brought it up. And that's where, and again, it's not that one's valuable and the other's not, it's this combination. So I love the
Exactly.
quote about learning outside of the academy. It doesn't devalue what you learn in the academy, but it's the real learning. It isn't just leaving or learning outside of the academy. It's that third way. It's that mixture. And that's what we're hoping to do with this knowledge garden as
Well,
well.
one more word, and that
Please.
is what that we have here in Louisville locally, a collaboration of university, and it's not my university, but another university in town, and a hospital, and research entities that work on cardiovascular research, and its innovation. And
Nice.
what's interesting, though, is they take high school students, they take curious high school students, curious graduate students, curious undergraduate students, postdocs from Yale, from
Wow.
other parts of the United States and big universities. They
Mm-hmm.
put them all together, and they work on projects that tie to maker spaces. They've taken research projects up in the space shuttle when the space
Wow.
shuttle program was alive and well. But what's neat about that, Matt, is exactly what you said. It's out of the box, and they have 15-year-olds working with 40-year-olds,
That's
and it's
fantastic.
about the mind. It's not about, oh, what's your pedigree, what's your
Mm-hmm.
background.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a grad professor who used to like to say, Kurt, there's no one has a monopoly on brains. We need everybody to contribute. And what you're saying, and there's a democratization of knowledge in the Knowledge Garden. That's the other
100%.
thing, that I know democracy is a dicey concept in many places, but the reality is that we need to be thinking along these lines, that why do we only have to have people who have a certain type of skill set or pedigree or
Yeah.
degree or whatever working on the problems. When I look, I did some research this week. Albert Einstein's PhD thesis was 24 pages. And he
Wow.
wrote four articles. He wrote 4 articles in 1905 that all rocked Brownian motion, theory of relativity, one other element too, all rocked the disciplines, not just one discipline, all scientific disciplines for
Wow.
100 years. And he's got his doctorate on a 24-page article. Most people write 200 or 300-page books to get those things.
Jeez.
And
Yeah.
and what it tells me, though, is this is something. Now, I'm not trying to compare Einstein, who was a genius, to all of us, because we
But
probably all have to do a lot more to get to that point. But the reality is, with the right set of tools and the right mindset that you're promoting, you can start to see some of these things crystallize and come together. I'll be
definitely.
quiet. Thank you for having me.
No, no, we want you more. We're gonna follow up with what curiosity based leadership again is and can be. So thanks again for taking time to get curious. And until next time, yeah, stay curious.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you.